And today's guest is Phil Kendro. Welcome to Veterans Corner, Phil.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Phil Kendro is the mastermind behind some of San Diego's most spectacular events, the Miramar Air Show, San Diego Fleet Week. He's an airline transport pilot who can literally fly the planes in his own air shows. What route did you want to take, or were you kind of motivated to do something that you already had preconceived?
I was in high school. I was always watching the show Wings on Discovery Channel, which talked about every single aircraft in detail.
Right. What comes up within you to take charge in that moment, right?
So I was a little disappointed at first because I wanted to fly.
What can you say about networking?
Yeah, so fortunately, I looked at networking when I first started doing it the wrong way. It was a very scary time.
What were some of the mindsets you might say now that you look back?
One is the financial piece. Make sure you're financially prepared. Second is definitely bringing your spouse in any of those discussions and those transition groups. Third one is
how do you remain centered, full of energy, and focused? Welcome to Veterans Corner. I'm George Hinestrosa, an Air Force and Army retired veteran of 25 years. Here on the show, we explore how military experience transforms into business success. Each episode features veterans who've built thriving businesses, sharing strategies that turn military training into entrepreneurial advantage. And today's guest is Phil Kendro. Welcome to Veterans Corner, Phil.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Beautiful. Thanks for being here, Phil. I know you're a busy guy, but before we get started, I'd like to give the audience just a little background on yourself because you have a lot going on and I don't want them to miss any of this. So picture this. You're standing in front of 500,000 people. The sky is filled with military aircraft in perfect formation. Every detail, from air traffic coordination to VIP seating to live television broadcast, has to be flawless. One mistake, and you've not just ruined an event, you've potentially created a disaster on a massive scale. Now imagine doing that dozens of times year after year and somehow making it look effortless. Today's guest has lived in that pressure cooker for over a decade. Phil Kendro is the mastermind behind some of San Diego's most spectacular events, the Miramar Air Show, San Diego Fleet Week, and what he calls the largest flyover of San Diego since World War II. But here's where it gets really interesting. Phil isn't just an event planner who got lucky with aviation gigs. He's an airline transport pilot who can literally fly the planes in his own air shows. He's coached over 2,000 veterans through career transitions. He's worked directly with everyone from ESPN to the San Diego Padres to military brass and elected officials. And somehow, in between orchestrating these massive spectacles and flying aircraft most of us can only see in museums, he's built a consulting business that's lasted 13 years in one of the most competitive markets in America. He is a trusted San Diego leader with a proven track record in cross-functional team leadership, networking, business development, marketing, veteran mentorship, communications, public relations, aviation and ground operations, executive program and project management, social and historical media, keen insight into business leader engagement, elected officials, and military protocol within the San Diego region and on an international scale. Phil, what an introduction. You're such a busy person, Phil, but before we get going into some of your entrepreneurial evolutions, why don't we just share with the audience where we all started? When you were a young man, and you're looking to join the military, and maybe you had a family member, maybe you had someone you looked up to that brought you or gave you the impetus to move forward into the military. Can you just share a little bit with us about that?
Yeah, of course. But first of all, George, I got to tell you that if you ever want to go anywhere with me and do introductions for me, I'll take you anywhere. So that's pretty lengthy. That's like an introduction for a few people, honestly.
It would be my honor. It would be my honor, sir.
So I came from a divorced family. Parents were divorced around the age of 5 or 6. And during the summertime frame, to kind of give me some family life, they'd send me down to my grandparents in Jacksonville, Florida. So I was raised in the D.C., Northern Virginia area. And so those summertime, from about the age of 5 to 18, they'd send me every summer down to Jacksonville, Florida, visit my grandparents, and kind of a family, really like a family life.
Right.
2 parents in the household. My grandmother really and grandfather really kind of partially raised me. My grandfather was a Navy Chief Petty Officer, served in the Korean War, post-World War II, and then up to Vietnam, and really instilled a sense of service, country, basic community. I've got great photos of me, like with the out of t-shirt, 5, 6-year-old kid saluting the flag out in the front with my grandpa holding the flag proudly. Pictures of me wearing his uniform around the house and stuff. So really early, he got me interested in going to the military, into the Navy. So in high school, I did a junior ROTC. You look like one of those South American dictators with all the medals all the way down.
Right.
But actually, that was amazing because what it did, I got one of the few scholarships from junior ROTC to go to ROTC at Penn State for 4 years. And so that's how I came into the military. And then the first year, second year, I was like, what? The Navy sounds great, but the Marine Corps sounds better. I had some Marine Corps mafia kind of surrounding me and got me interested in that. And so then decided to go in the Marine Corps instead.
Wow, that's beautiful. So Phil, so you went into the Marine Corps. You started going through ROTC and you said, okay, you're going into the Marine Corps. What you were going to do, had you thought about, okay, I'm just going to be kicked down doors. I'm going to be there before everybody gets there and make sure everything's safe for everyone to get there? Or did you think, hey, what route did you want to take? Or were you kind of motivated to do something that you already had preconceived?
Yeah, I definitely was aviation. From a young age, I was always very interested in airplanes. My father took me out to the air show in D.C. at Andrews Air Force Base when I was small and really got interested. I mean, that's one thing I'll tell you about working air shows is you get to get these youngsters motivated for the future for something awesome to do. And so that got me interested early. I was in high school. I was always watching the show Wings on Discovery Channel, which talked about every single aircraft in detail.
Right. I remember.
When my girlfriend, I think, got sick of it because I'd be sitting there watching Wings all the time. So aviation, then I was fortunate. And during my time at Penn State, they got an aviation guarantee with the Marine Corps, which meant that pretty much as long as you were physically fit, your eyeballs were good and everything, that you could go into the Marine Corps in aviation contracting as a pilot. And so that's what I did.
Okay. So tell us a little bit. That's not being an aviator in the Marines is kind of, well, being an aviator is exclusive regardless, right? But just being in the Marines and being an aviator, were you flying the Harriers or not the Harriers? Yeah, we call them Harriers too, right?
Yeah. So my military occupational specialty, my MOS, was as a Harrier pilot. But I spent as much time boots on the ground as in the air. I flew the Harrier for a bit, deployed in Iraq for a short bit with that aircraft. I was a T-34 instructor down in Pensacola. I was a Cessna Citation business jet instructor, so that's when we flew the VIPs around. And we flew that all over the planet, which was a lot of fun. But then, like I said, boots on the ground as a company commander for the invasion in 2003 in Iraq. I was operations in Afghanistan in 2012 to 14 timeframe. And then I was a Fort Air Controller in Iraq in 2007, based out of Okinawa. So I had about 10 years of on the ground experience and 10 years of flying experience and just a multi-role Marine, I guess.
Okay, so that just brings so much, because I've had friends that have done bits and pieces of what you just mentioned. Now, what is going through your veins when you're actually on the ground in a situation like that? I mean, what are the feelings of life or death? Is there any point during that period when you were boots on the ground or in flying, for that matter, where you felt like maybe your life was really in jeopardy here, or maybe every time you went out, your life was in jeopardy, obviously. But what were those impactful moments as a young man going through that experience? What was it you were feeling? Your family's back home.
I was fortunate. I had a girlfriend during the first one, the invasion. And so writing the letters was really important to me, honestly. That was a big thing that kept us motivated. An interesting experience is kind of what's going on in Israel and Iran right now. Is I remember watching missiles basically being shot down by Patriot missile batteries over us when we were in Kuwait just after the invasion had started, and they started lobbing weapons at us. And so that was definitely a moment where we're trying to get in the bunkers. I'm literally holding a Marine down, trying to put his gas mask on him because he's freaking out while everybody's trying to huddle in these bunkers and wonder if we're going to get hit with missiles, and then watching them literally explode above your head. So that was definitely an interesting moment where I could not be fearful, because if I did that or showed that to my Marines, then of course they would feed off of that. So that was one thing I would say it was definitely an interesting experience. Another one, unfortunately, was flying the Harrier in Iraq years ago. We'd be diving down, either dropping bombs or doing something called a show of force, where you want to scare the enemy and kind of motivate the troops sometimes. And a nosedive, doing a show of force, and all of a sudden a predator goes whizzing by my head. Basically was in the wrong area. So that was almost a midair that happened. It wasn't so much fun. So that definitely got me puckered up a little bit there.
Wow.
I mean, everybody has their own experiences. Guys were kicking out doors, having boots on foreheads and stuff. And yeah, so there's definitely different experiences. I have a lot of infantrymen, though, that have so much more frightful experiences living in huts, staying in Afghanistan, the most casualties of any unit in Afghanistan. So there's many stories out there that are much worse than mine, or much more terrifying.
You mentioned your Marines, right? So obviously, what rank were you at that time? Did you feel like maybe your age, or maybe you weren't even thinking about that, but how did you feel like being the example or being the leader that you actually are. You mentioned that a minute ago, but talk a little bit more about that. The leadership role, what comes up within you to take charge in that moment, right? To actually like, okay, this is me. I'm it.
Yeah, so it was interesting. So the invasion 2003 was kind of interesting for me because was in a flight instructor and I went back to Yuma, Arizona to fly. So basically showed up at a squadron and said, hey, welcome aboard. And then a few weeks later, like, hey, we're taking you out. You're going to a different unit. It was a ground unit. Mm-hmm. So I was a little disappointed at first because I wanted to fly. That stuff was coming up. And so this is November of 2002. Next thing I know, in February of 2003, I'm in Kuwait with 200 Marines and sailors. And I'm in charge now with a unit I've never heard about, never learned about, learning on the job. And what we would do is basically we would take over airfields, and then we would develop the airfield, the air traffic control, the fuel, the food, building the base itself, like anything you imagine a base needs, electricity, gas. And so I had to learn pretty much on the job. And now I'm going to invade a country, these folks with a job I really don't know. But the Marine Corps teaches we're all riflemen first. And so I had to go back to that basic instinct of just leadership 101 and listening to my senior enlisted leaders, listening to my warrant officers that have been doing this for decades. And so for me, I'm a collaborative guy. Like, I don't want to make the decisions just solely based on my thoughts. I want to take everybody's thoughts in. And so luckily I was surrounded by some really good Marines to help me make the right decisions too.
That's such a beautiful quality to be able to sit there, observe and take it all in and just be able to make the right decisions for everyone, right? Not just based on instinct. Sometimes we need to retrospect and, okay, let's look at everything. That's so interesting. So Phil, when it was time for you to move on, and obviously maybe by this time you were married, and so how did all of those things start to play into your mind? Like, so here you're an officer, obviously it's different than an enlisted. You're going to resign your commission or you're just going to get out. And so you're thinking, okay, what am I going to do next? Or what's my next step?
So 5 years before my 20-year mark, I finally got my first mentors. The Marine Corps is really good about showing some good leadership and some people that are bad leaders as well. So you learn from both of those. But I don't really think the military is as good about mentorship, about not just caring about your career in the military, but you as a whole, your family. What do you want to do when you quote unquote grow up? And about 5 years before, so in the 2010 timeframe, I finally had a guy said, hey, what do you want to do? What can I do to help you out? And he got me started down a path to say like, hey, maybe I don't pick up lieutenant colonel, so I have to get out in 20 years anyway. So going out to the local organizations, going out to a group called the San Diego Military Advisory Council, SDMAC, and networking with people, going and find civilian mentors, non-military mentors who basically help me out and learn about what's out there in jobs and what I need to be doing. Got me into a graduate program, so that was great. That, hey, I got my master's, so I got some better education and some certificates. And then LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn. I think I was one of the first however many people on LinkedIn to start there. And everybody's like, why are you 5 years out doing that? It's like, well, he's telling me to do this, so I'm doing this. And it really helped me develop an amazing network here in the San Diego area. And so come time, I didn't get picked up for lieutenant colonel. I was a person not afraid to stand up sometimes to my commanding officers and tell them I think that they were making bad decisions. I did it tactfully. Sometimes they didn't like it. Sometimes my Marines needed me to speak up on their behalf because there was stuff that was going on that wasn't right, and I tried to speak up on their behalf. And so some people didn't like that again. So I was a terminal major, so at 20 years, I had to get out, and it was good because that was a perfect time in my 40s, early 40s to get out and got lots of time to go do whatever in the business world.
Right. So you mentioned networking, and that's real important because you actually started networking within the service. So how would you say that, how important is networking in general then to you, right? So you said networking. Now you're transitioning, you're thinking about it where you are now in retrospect, hindsight, right? What can you say about networking?
Yeah, so fortunately, I looked at networking when I first started doing it the wrong way. I looked at it that I was going to find somebody that was going to have a job for me, as opposed to looking at, hey, I'm going to meet somebody, we're going to establish a relationship over time, and then maybe there's different opportunities, not necessarily a job, a volunteer opportunity, maybe an event, maybe another group to go meet with. And so it took me a while to figure out actually what networking was. One of the things I always did, though, is I always sat in the front table, always sat in the front of the row of the audience or whatever, so I can engage eye to eye with the people speaking.
Right.
If they had a panel discussion or somebody was talking, a keynote speaker. So to me, that was one thing I did right, was I was always up front and I wasn't afraid to go up to people. But that's one thing of why we created our Veterans Beer Club that we'll talk about, is because we're trying to help out other veterans with a little more easier way to jump into networking. It's not very easy. Even if you were to go to the Officers Club at like Miramar or Camp Pendleton, all the aviators are probably talking to each other. All the people in logistics are probably hanging out. All the communication officers are probably hanging out. Where networking, you really need to be able to talk to all those different people. And that's the reason why some of these groups I ran with or worked with was basically trying to get all those different people to come together and talk. There was one networking group here in San Diego that I loved, that they had basically people, if you were standing on the wall, not talking to anybody, just on your phone, they would grab you and say, hey, how are you doing? What do you want to do? Here, let me introduce you so-and-so. And so they'd actually bring people to the different little huddle of people talking to kind of make them engaged. And I love seeing that.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because some people are kind of averse to big crowds, right? Or they feel, like you say, they just feel like a little bit of, I don't know, shyness, maybe going and initiating a conversation or something with someone. But yeah, now that you have transitioned, let's say, right, you're getting ready, you're walking out the door and you're walking into your new life with your family. How did you carry your military, or how do you feel that that helped you push out the door? And were you conscious of being an ex-military, or were you all of a sudden just a civilian, or were you still caught between the uniform and civilian life?
Yeah, it's funny you talk about like a scary moment in the military. Well, this is probably the scariest moment a lot of us face, is this transition, because it's the only time we're going to really do this, the first time we're kind of doing it, and a lot of us don't know how to do it. So it was a very scary time. Unfortunately, I didn't pick up a job immediately, or basically before or immediately after getting out. So that was made it even scarier, and was really kind of a dark time for me, because I was struggling. I was doing everything I was told to do. I was out there pushing resumes. I was out there networking, and nothing was coming to fruition. But luckily, because of networking I had done like a year and a half before that, I had another Navy veteran who's now his best friend, Sean Park, reached out, and he had a job for me doing business development for an IT company, which I did for about two and a half years. And it was a great way to blend in, because it was a defense contracted company, so they're still with the military. And I never really, I would say, I took the uniform off, but I did in some ways because of my keeping on with all the different community organizations and veteran organizations that work with the military, that I was still at all those SDMAC breakfasts. I was still going to all these different events where there was a lot of military leaders. I was still helping out with the air show and other events. So I never really took the uniform, and I feel like right now I still don't have, I still got the haircut, because I just can't let my hair grow out. I just can't do it. I've tried, and still work a lot with those. Yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting. So from that job, where did you see yourself going? Like, once you said you just did that for about 2 years, and then what did you find yourself? What motivated you to move on? I mean, there must have been a little spark there that said, okay, well, I feel like I got to do this now.
It's interesting. I think that most veterans friends that I have, they're probably at least through their third or fifth job. So it's not uncommon for them to switch. You kind of get that job of necessity, and then you finally maybe get a job of passion. It may take a few times to get there. I had two amazing bosses that I worked with at that company, a guy named Chuck Henry, a guy named Mike Lawrence. Chuck was a Navy F-14 guy. Mike Lawrence was a Marine Corps skid. They were amazing human beings, but they were like, Phil, you need to go do something else more interesting for you, because this is not it. And so I was very fortunate to actually get to talk with the CEO of JetBlue. And because after you lose currency and proficiency in aviation, the airlines normally won't bring you in anymore. You have to go basically get back and fly in some type of regional airlines or something. But JetBlue brought me on after talking to their COO. Was there for about 16 months, and then United gave me an offer, and they have so many more aircraft and more opportunities that I joined United back in 2019, right before COVID hit. And then that was a whole nother experience, because I had to pick up another job because I wasn't sure if I was going to be furloughed from the airlines.
Right. So let's talk a little bit. So here's Phil. He's going through these job transitions. And so at this time you're married, obviously, right? Let's talk a little bit about the family unit then. So you're going and you're doing these things. How is your wife or your children? How do you feel? How are you carrying those forward? Your family life versus your professional life? How are you dealing with that? And then obviously Phil's personal life, right? So we all have these little kind of things that intertwine. We can't really separate them. They're just there, right? So how was Phil dealing with that?
Yeah, and that's a good one. So a lot of the stuff that I felt like I did well, i.e. getting the mentorship early, and some of the stuff that I'm doing now very well, I failed at some things. And I joke when I speak at veteran panels, I say start eating ramen noodles to save money, especially here in California, because financially I did not do a very good job preparing. And so that was something that my wife luckily was able to pull me into be much better about my finances. We didn't have really good conversations, I think about the transition sometimes too. So I think that I failed to bring my spouse into that last year of the transition. So she kind of got to go out and see what was going on. So there's a couple of things I talk to people about. Really bring your spouse in and make sure financially sound coming out, because after that first year of being out and now you're paying California taxes, it's a kick. It's a big kick because you weren't necessarily doing that. I was a state of Florida resident before that, and now I'm paying these crazy taxes. California is the only state to fully tax our pension, so that was also getting taxed. So I didn't do a very good job in that, and luckily I did have a wife that at some point pulled me in to be better. She definitely struggled on the roller coaster ride with me sometimes because the networking is intense and it's very often many days of the week. And doesn't understand why am I doing all this. And so that was one thing I think that we struggled to finally kind of make her understand. But again, that was probably something I could have done better that last year of pulling her in. The kids were young. They really don't remember me being in uniform. They look at those pictures that I have and they think it's cute, but they really don't remember much about it. But that first year was definitely a struggle of trying to balance out the work-life balance and even trying to find jobs. That was, like I said, it was dark. When you think that you're on top of the world, you had a great job, and now you're unemployed. It's a really dark place for somebody after 20 years of being constantly employed and getting that paycheck and everything. So those months until I got a job was kind of ugly.
Wow. So that's incredible. So Phil, now you've walked us a little bit through some of your career advancements there, or just your personal choices and what you were doing. Now to where Phil is now, I feel like you're in the flow now, right? You're in that flow. I think you're a well-known guy but how does the responsibility of an air show, something like that, because I mean, that's akin to being in combat, right? Because everything there, people might be there enjoying themselves, but this is a mission. Regardless of how you look at it, it's a mission, a full-blown mission, right? So many moving parts. How do you take on that responsibility with everything going on in the world? I mean, how do you focus yourself into something like that? I mean, this is not a usual thing. So this is why I asked the question.
You surround yourself with an amazing team, a professional team that's not afraid to speak up. Right now, we're preparing for the 250th Navy and Marine Corps birthday celebration. And I've got amazing Americans, patriots around me that are just great ideas. They know how to get the permits. They know how to do logistics. They know how to do the coordination and the communication. And so that's number one, is you just surround yourself with a great team. And that's what I've been very fortunate. If it was the Miramar Air Show, it was his 250th birthday. If it's a flyover at Torero Stadium or Snapdragon, we've got a team of people that are helping out. Our local FSDO, FAA folks are really great about helping us out. The tower coordinators at Lindbergh and North Island and Montgomery Field and all these other places, they're amazing human beings. Sunshine with Southern California TRACON. When I coordinate flyovers, she is there to do any phone call any time of the day. So that's one thing I say is number one, you got amazing people around you. And two, it's just your expertise after a while. I was a Ford Air Controller as well in the Marine Corps, so coordinating aircraft over time, over target with different altitudes or different ranges or different timing, you kind of that intuitive to you after a certain time frame. And after you do it I've been doing air shows and stuff probably since 2000 time frame off and on. So for 25 years, you definitely get some just knowledge and intuition. And then again, but number one thing is putting those great people around you.
That's wonderful, Phil. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Again, networking is surrounding yourself with the right people or trying to find the right people. And then at the end is kind of now you're talking about being surrounded by that right people. So as you move along, what you're saying is you're finding the right people and they're becoming part of your entourage, or not your entourage, but maybe just part of your circle of influence or whatever we want to call it. So both of those things, I think, go hand in hand. And that's a wonderful point. So let's talk about now, if you were going to give some advice to a transitioning service member, whether it be officer or enlisted or whatever, male, female, doesn't matter. What is a couple of the things you might say what was some of the mindsets you might say now that you look back, if I would have just done this or if I would have just gone this way, what do you feel you would tell someone like that?
Well, again, so the two things I already talked about, one is the financial piece. Make sure you're financially prepared. Second is definitely bringing your spouse in any of those discussions in those transition groups. Third one is Veterans Beer Club I have to talk about, because that was a organization that we formed for this exact purpose. And so there's organizations like that. We've got multiple chapters around the United States, and two of the three of us, so three Marines founded VBC in 2016. We got together and said, hey, Kevin Cortez and I really struggled in the transition, and Brian Grana, the third guy, was doing okay. We said, we need to make it easier so that whole going to network or bring your spouse out or any of that type of stuff, we need to make it easier for everybody.
Right.
And so our first group of 6 people met at Second Chance Beer Company in mid-2016. Since then, we had our 9th anniversary. We've got over a dozen active chapters through the United States. And we do 3 things is important. One is that networking. So it's getting that networking, going to those transition groups. There's multiple awesome transition groups. The Honor Foundation helps out with special operations folks. You've got 4Block. You've got Vet CTAP, which is local here in San Diego. You've got Onward to Opportunity across the United States. So you need to go to those networking or you get those transition groups, and here's events to go to with hiring. And then, so that's one thing is the networking piece. Number two we do also is that we translate military service to community service. So a lot of us sit on boards, we're volunteers for different organizations, and we take all of that expertise, that energy that we have, and we go out in the community and help out the community. And so that's why I'm involved with so many different groups, because I love helping out with the community with different things. And then the third reason is keeping that sense of camaraderie. After we first formed VBC, after a few months, we had people coming out of city and out of state to go to our group just because they miss being around a lot of people. Many business organizations don't necessarily have like a military cadre in there. And so you miss having that bond with people and having those conversations. And that's why VBC has been so successful now, is because those things of what you're asking to help out those people as they're transitioning, we're doing all of that above. Literally, I had in one of my last meetings, somebody's like, hey, I need a job. What do? I do admin. Well, hey, here's Neil. He needs somebody to do admin, and hired her. I mean, that from like meeting there. And we've got close bonds now pretty much with every military affiliate organization. San Diego Military Advisory Council that I used to go to as this young guy transitioned to the military now is a big partner of ours with VBC, because they see the value. We see our value with each other of helping one another out. And it's all about collaboration. San Diego is an amazing place for collaboration. So whenever you can collaborate with a group, you're going to be successful.
Right. So Phil, let's talk a little bit about Phil now, like personally, introspectively. How do you find time to center yourself? Let's just use that word. When is your centering time? Do you still have a physical workout daily or every other day? How's your diet? Things like that. How does Phil take care of Phil now? Because you take care of everyone else. How do you remain centered, full of energy, and focused?
Yeah, trail running is my number one thing. Trail running is totally my mental health. Going out in the mountains, or I'm fortunate with the airline, as an airline captain, that I get to travel a lot and I get to see a lot of places. So for me, I'm kind of a history geek as well. So I will set up a trail when I go to different cities, and I'll basically run the trail, and I'll learn about different parts of the city and look for the historical little signs about why was that place significant or another. So number one, trail running is really my number one mental health thing, I would say, honestly. Unfortunately, I got injured. So right now I'm just trying to walk our awesome German Shepherd, who's amazing. So luckily, because he needs walking, that means I have to go walking with him, which is good too. Eating wise and stuff like that, I can always do better with my veggies. I know that one. So when I'm flying, I'll definitely try to grab a salad a little more often. But I'm definitely a red meat type of guy. So everything's still going good with my cholesterol, and the doctor keeps telling me. So I'll keep that eating habits like that. But the trail running, honestly, I tell you, some of the photos and places I've been, and Rocky Mountain National Park, or on top of some island and stuff, and then pause and just be thankful. I basically give a prayer. Like, that's one of the things, like, I love to get to the top of the mountain, and I give a prayer of thankfulness for just what I have in life, my children, good health, a job, good friends. That's the type of stuff that I really helps me stay focused.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for sharing that. Before we chime off here, and I appreciate your time, and all you busy guy, if there's one or two things you would want to share from the heart with in regard to veterans and what we live today, and the experience that some veterans actually go through, struggling, some are doing well, is what's from your heart right now? If you had to share something with the audience that just comes from Phil's heart, what would that be?
You find a good group of people to surround yourself with. Unfortunately, recently I've found out, I think, that a couple more Marine veteran friends of mine from years past had killed themselves. And so the number one thing is find that group of people that is willing to call you day and night, check up on you, be there to lean on, be there to cheer you on, whatever it might be. If it's like a VBC, if it's a church group, if it's a running club, whatever it might be, find something that's people that are always going to be there for you, and you can be there for them and lean on each other. So that is the biggest thing to say, because the veteran suicide with people being by themselves, not with that group, it's a punch in the gut. And it just makes me sad and furious at the same time that we keep dealing with these issues. And I think that if they just had some better people being better advocates, cheerleaders, whatever you want to call, to keep them motivated, I think we would be doing much better out there.
Well, thank you for that, Phil. Yeah, definitely. I've had several friends go down that path. But again, Phil, thank you so much for your time today, sir. And thank you for your continued service. I wish you the best. Stay healthy and stay sharp, because you need to.
No, thanks, sir. I appreciate your time here. That's very kind.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And again, God bless you. And as we come into this 4th of July time to celebrate, and to think back on why we celebrate the 4th of July, we need to really keep that in mind. Again, thank you for your service, and love to have you back in the future.
Hey, George, thank you, and wish you the best, and happy 4th.
Thank you very much, sir.